The tale you am free to believe or not as you please. It stands upon my father's words, and he always declared he was ready to kiss the book upon it before judge and jury. He said, too, that he never had the wit to make up such a yarn, and he defied anyone to explain about the loch in particular by any other tale. But you shall judge for yourself.
Books, 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 books.
Hello and welcome to Didn't Read It, the podcast that thinks dudes deserve to have intimate friendships too. I am your host, Grace Todd, and with me today is a new friend of the pod, Jake Phillips. Hey, buddy.
Hey, Grace. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
How you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Deep in the south, and the tornadoes are spooling up.
Oh, no.
Their power ready to roll over across us. So hopefully we'll get through that okay. But beyond that, if you hear a loud noise and I just run off, that's me scampering for cover.
If the sirens go off and the audio cuts abruptly, don't worry. We'll pick back up down the line.
Exactly.
Yes, hello. I am podcasting from a cellar.
Exactly.
Send help. Send whiskey. Well, hopefully that doesn't happen.
I hope so.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. So my name is Jake Phillips. I am from Mississippi originally. I've joined the military, went all over the world, lost my accent when I need to, and then but I have a YouTube channel, The Cultured Bumpkin, where and on social media, where I like to take the classics and put a Southern spin upon them. And I just think that's fun. So yeah, I've got married 4 kids. They're all very young, and so we have a big time. I do a lot of, I'm very childlike. So if that ever comes across, so I was like military officer. Used to be, a captain, walk in the room and everybody's like, oh, and then I'm out of the military now, and now I'm just dad. So I don't know. Sometimes I have moments of sort of rigidity, you might say, and then, but also can surprise you with like, well, that was really childish for a full-grown man with kids.
Now, do your kids get like full-scale theatrical bedtime stories? Because you are a voice actor,
right?
So like,
right.
I mean, are we talking like multiple characters? You're like dropping different voices.
From time to time, yes. From time, not every night. That is high energy, and a lot of times at the end of the day, I'm ready to unwind, just like someone else. But a lot of the time, yes. And then, like the last couple of weeks, I've been in Chicago recording an audio drama. The next season of an audio drama I'm in.
Oh, that's exciting.
And so I'm not gone very often. So the kids all miss me. So they started listening to The Wind in the Willows that I just posted, and they're like, oh, that's Dad, and that's full blown. Like Mr. Toad is a redneck with money, you know what I mean? It's a fun story, and they're all like, oh, that was so good, Dad, we love Mr. Toad.
That's delightful. Well, it is work though. I guess at the end of the day, if they start getting demanding, you just put out a tip jar, right? And you're like,
right,
you want the good voices in Matilda, you need to give Daddy $5.
Exactly. Just treat them like any other audience.
All right. Well, so, welcome, of course. Very excited to have you. Now, what do you know, if anything, about Cornwall?
In England?
Well, that is actually debatable depending on which Cornish people you ask, but yes.
Okay. Well, very little. I've heard the term. I've heard of, a lot of, at least in American pop culture, that's where the pirates come from, so to speak. And to me, that's believable with the hard R like the Irish have. The further you go west, the more that R starts to show up in some accents anyway. So beyond that, and I don't even know if that's true. That's all I know.
So yes, very coastal. Are you familiar with Poldark?
I've watched an episode or two, but never went through the whole thing. But I was one of those I loved it and then just didn't keep on because I was busy or whatever.
Yes. No, that makes so Poldark is Cornwall. He's in
Okay.
Cornwall.
Okay.
And Cornwall, and I want to apologize in advance to any Cornish people listening for this comparison, although I do think it's fairly apt. The way that Cornwall is kind of talked about and written about reminds me a little bit of like Texas,
Okay.
in that
Out
Cornwall
west.
is it's like it is a part of England, unless you ask certain Cornish people who are like, no. There's England, and then there's Cornwall.
Okay.
Like, we are special and different.
Yeah. I have friends from Wales that some of them are like that. Like, no, this is Wales. This isn't England. And then other ones are like, meh.
Right. And so like Wales broadly very much acknowledged to be its own thing. Cornwall less acknowledged, but on that same kind of wavelength. It's a peninsula. It's very coastal, very rural. Had like a very unique culture to it for a long time, and still does, but definitely like around when the story that we're talking about was written was very much a distinct sort of cultural place. And so today we are talking about a ghost story set in Cornwall by a Cornish man, Arthur. He's got such a delightful old-timey name, Arthur Quiller-Couch.
Arthur Quiller-Couch.
Hyphenated. Quiller-Couch.
Quiller-Couch. What is it? What does that mean? I know those old words. It was like, oh, no, that means something. It's not just.
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't even think to check. Let's see. Quiller-Couch name meaning. Okay. Well, the Couch family and the Quiller family separately were a big deal in Cornwall, apparently.
Okay.
So very fancy. But the story that we're doing today by Arthur Quiller-Couch is called The Roll Call of the Reef.
Okay.
And it is going to dig very much into Cornwall's kind of maritime history and their status as you mentioned. It doesn't really mention this particularly, but like there's a long tradition in Cornwall of like smugglers and piracy and shipwreck salvage. And we'll get into that last part. The story was originally published in 1895.
Okay.
I found it in this excellent book called Cornish Horrors,
Nice.
Tales from the Land's End.
Nice. I wonder what it's about.
No idea. Couldn't tell you. Which was edited by Joan Passy, who also wrote a book called The Cornish Gothic, which I read for a little bit of the research.
Okay.
So, it's a place with its own like very distinct culture. And I think that some of that plays into this story. So this story is kind of a framing device within a framing device. We have a main narrator, who is the one who kind of wrote this down. He doesn't have a name.
Okay.
We don't really get any details about him. He is receiving this story from a man named Matthew, who is a quarryman, who is telling the story that he got from his own father, Matthew, the quarryman. And so it's a narrator within a narrator. The whole thing is essentially told as if Matthew is telling it to us, the reader. And most of the story is either Matthew himself or Matthew paraphrasing other people. And that being said, would you like to come on an adventure with me?
I would love to. Let's go on an adventure.
The Roll Call of the Reef.
Yes, sir. They've hung here all my time and most of my father's. The women won't touch 'em. They're afraid of the story. So here they'll dangle and gather dust and smoke till another tenant comes and tosses 'em out of doors for rubbish. Phew! 'Tis coarse weather, surely.
He went to the door, opened it, and stood studying the gale that beat upon his cottage front, straight from the Manacle Reef. The rain drove past him into the kitchen, aslant like threads of gold silk in the shine of the wreck wood fire. By the same firelight, I examined the relics on my knee. The trumpet was evidently an old cavalry trumpet, and the threads of its party-colored sling, though frayed and dusty, still hung together. Around the side drum, beneath its cracked brown varnish, I could trace a royal coat of arms and a legend running per mare per terram, the motto of the Marines. As I turned it on my knee, I found the drum attached to the trumpet by a curious barrel-shaped padlock and paused to examine it. The body of the lock was composed of half a dozen brass rings, and, rubbing the brass with my thumb, I saw that each of the 6 had a series of letters engraved around it. So, our narrator of the narrator, he's in a Cornish quarryman's cottage. We don't know why. And his host has started to explain to him, because he's noticed it, the story of this military trumpet and military drum that are padlocked together and hanging over Matthew the quarryman's fireplace. It's a night of bad weather, which obviously I think is what gets us into the ghost story. Maybe our narrator is some, stuck-up Englishman who got out of his depth and has been offered shelter in the cottage for the night. It's not really clear. And the one kind of important thing about the lock holding these 2 instruments together is that it is a brass padlock that opens with a word instead of a numerical combination. So each of the spinners has a letter on it, which I think I've seen before. That's a thing that exists. I suppose. I don't know.
I think I have.
I kind of like it. Like, now that I've heard about it, I kind of want one.
Yeah, definitely. Me too.
I want a word padlock.
Maybe they come in a 2-pack and we'll split it.
All right, there we go. Well, we find out later that it came from like a Lisbon brass merchant. So we gotta go to Lisbon, apparently.
Okay. Send off for it.
And so our narrator's host, now that they've gotten into the story, he goes on and says,
"'Twas just such a wind, east by south, that brought in what you've got between your hands. Back in the year 9 it was. My father's told me the tale a score times. You're twisting round the rings, I see, but you'll never guess the word. Parson Kendall, he made the word and locked down a couple of ghosts in their graves with it. And when his time came, he went to his own grave and took the word with him."
As we said, our narrator's host's father lived in the same cottage, and the story that begins to unfold is that it was January of 1809. There was a violent storm, not unusual for this part of the world. So one of the things about Cornwall is it's kind of because of how it's situated geographically, it gets hit with very strong storms, more so than the rest of the coast, I think, or like, I don't know. It's situated like between the English Channel and the Irish Sea. And Matthew, now our narrator's father, there's the 2 Matthews is going to get very confusing.
Okay.
So we're going to say Daddy Matthew and regular Matthew. So Daddy Matthew
Okay.
is drawn out of bed by this violent storm in 1809. And we are assured that he is only checking on his potato patch. And there is no other reason for him to be up and about during this storm, which is probably regular Matthew being a little bit coy. Because the implication here is that Daddy Matthew is definitely not getting out of bed to go check and see if there are any shipwrecks happening.
Okay.
Because he would never.
He's not a redneck. He's not going to go watch somebody's house burn while he just stands in the street eating popcorn. He's not that kind of a guy. He's out checking on his stuff.
His potato patch, very important potato patch.
Right.
Because they are not, desperately waiting to see if a ship wrecks so that they can salvage all the stuff inside it. Right. And so the storm is blowing, and it is apparently like so powerful that at points he has to like physically crawl, and there are like stones rolling past him. The potato patch, assuming that it was real, is completely fucked. The fencing
Yeah.
is gone.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
it's a mess.
If it's rolling boulders, I don't think your potatoes have a chance.
That's a good point. It's real boulder rolling weather, which sounds like it should be a redneckism if it's not yet. Let's make it one.
Okay.
You heard it here, folks.
That's right, boulder rolling.
And our narrator tells us that
My father, sir, was a very religious man, and if he reckoned the end of the world was at hand, there in the great wind and night among the moving stones, you may believe he was certain of it when he heard a gun fired, and with the same saw a flame shoot up out of the darkness to windward, making a sudden fierce light in all the place about. All he could find to think or say was, "The second coming, the second coming! The bridegroom cometh, and the wicked he'll toss like a ball into a large country." But by and by, between the two squalls, he made bold to lift his head and look, and then by the light he saw clear away to Manacle Point, and in the thick of the weather a sloop of war, with topgallasts housed, driving stern foremost toward the reef. It was she, of course, that was burning the flare.
there is a ship in distress off the coast, and it has not hit. It's sent off a flare. It is not yet wrecked, but it is in a bad place, and he can tell that it's basically doomed, right? Like the weather, the coastline, it's too rugged, it's too much. And being a good dude, right? A good religious man, now that he doesn't think that it's the second coming anymore. He decides to go like sprint. He goes running back to town basically to try and alert everyone that there's this ship that will probably require assistance and or be a lucrative thing to pick apart. But he goes running back along the cliffs, and he goes bursting into the first cottage he comes to. And they have there's a woman in the cottage whose name is Anne Ede, who is apparently like soaked to the bone. And he's like, there's a shipwreck. And she says, "Save the chap. What do ye mean by crying stale fish at that rate?"
What does that mean? I don't even know.
I think what she means I think that the sort of translation would be like, hold the phone. Why are you yelling about something I already know?
Gotcha.
And he's like, "But there's been a shipwreck." And she's like, "I know there's been a shipwreck." And there's a little bit of like a who's on first thing.
Okay.
Because it turns out there are two shipwrecks happening simultaneously.
Interesting. So stale fish meaning like old news, maybe, kind of.
Yes.
Okay.
Which I think is another turn of phrase that we should bring back.
That's, yeah, you try to, I try to tell you something you already know. Stale fish, man. Stale fish.
Yeah.
I knew this long ago.
That's what we should start doing when our friends try to like tell us about really depressing news that we already know, and we're too like existentially tired to talk. You're like, "I do not need Donald Trump's stale fish right now."
Stale fish. Yeah, exactly. I've been tracking this for months, lady. Don't.
Yeah.
Okay,
Like,
good. Okay, so we got rolling boulder rolling weather, and stale fish. We're gonna enrich our vocabulary, our cabinet full of idioms with those phrases, those Cornish turns of phrase.
a couple of regular Shakespeare's over here.
Mm-hmm.
And so Anne fills him in that the second shipwreck was a troop transport, and she says it was full of horse soldiers. And she keeps insistently referring to them as good long men, as in tall.
Right.
Which is very funny because later there is a character who is 6'2", and he's described vaguely as if he is some kind of giant, which just shows you how much taller people have become.
Yeah, that's but back then that would have been, George Washington was about 6'2", and he was if you read, stuff written about him, everyone's in awe of how humongous he is. He's like 6'2". I mean, that's a decent sized guy, but it's not a giant.
It is amazing what like basic prenatal nutrition has done for the general
Right.
heights of people.
Right. When all you eat is potatoes, you're going to top out at 5'4", 5'5",
Yeah, stale fish,
Right. If you add a little more protein, you might, get to your predestined height or whatever DNA code.
Yeah. So
Anyway, interesting.
so this
Cavalry.
ship, yes, full of very tall, which is I thought horse riding dudes were supposed to be smaller, but anyway, they're very tall. They have horses. They have unfortunately thrown the horses overboard, and the horses have already washed up on the shore because they are trying to get weight out of this boat.
Yeah.
And she describes the scene to him thusly.
They had rigged up ropes across her from bulwark to bulwark, and beside these the men were mustered, holding on like grim death whenever the sea made a clean breach over them, and standing up like heroes as soon as it passed. The captain and the officers were clinging to the rail of the quarterdeck, all in their golden uniforms, waiting for the end as if 'twas King George they expected. And besides them clung a trumpeter, a whacking big man. I'm adding that. He's whacking big. A whacking big man, and between the heavy seas he would lift his trumpet with one hand and blow a call, and every time he blew, the men give a cheer. There, hearken now, there he goes again, but you won't hear no cheering any more, for few are left to cheer, and their voices weak. Another wreck, you say? Well, there's no hope for the tender dears if 'tis the manacles. You better run down and help yonder, though 'tis little help any man can give. Not one came in alive while I was there. The tide's flowing, and she won't hold together another hour, they say. Interesting. I was actually in the U.S. cavalry, right? And I'm 6'5".
Really?
Yeah, they stuffed me down in a tank, and yeah, it's just what they do, I guess. But it says all in their golden uniforms. The cavalry, and we get it from the British, but the cavalry, the trimmings, the piping is gold. So that's how you could tell if they're infantry, they're going to have blue. If they're cavalry, they'd have gold. So that's an interesting little.
And it's interesting that it still sticks. So
right.
I was not aware. So it was Army cavalry?
I was armored. Yes.
I was not aware that we still had units that we called cavalry.
Yeah. Now the mounts are different.
Sure.
But a lot of the lingo is the same. Like instead of like the garage for all the tanks, we still call it the stable.
Now, genuine question. If the tank is your mount and you are stabling it, do you wind up with like an anthropomorphic relationship with this tank where you're like,
Absolutely. It is like it's like your lady. You know what I mean? You take care of her. When you park it, you see to her needs, just like a cavalryman out in the you gotta
brush her.
You brush her.
You shoe her.
You talk nice to her. You feed her. You top off her gas and oil. All the lubricants that are needed for all the road wheels and the tension and all that. You clean the mud off of her. You get her ready to fight and ride the next day. Absolutely. It's like you treat them and you usually name it after give it a girl's name as well. So yes, very much so.
Can you tell us what your tank's name was, or would that be inappropriate?
Well,
you're like, I don't like to
because there's a couple levels. So you have whatever you're allowed to paint upon the barrel, which might be sweetie pie. Yeah, that's okay. What you really call her, just amongst the crew, would be coarse and unseemly for a wonderful podcast such as this.
Sure.
But yes, just think inappropriate, and you're probably going to hit in the ballpark.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I feel you.
But it really does. It harkens back to the days when you ride all day or you fight all day, and at the end of the day, you get off and you do not eat until your horse eats. You do not change clothes or bathe or do anything until you have taken the saddle off, taken hay and brushed your horse down, made him or her very comfortable, you check their feet, make sure there's not a rock stuck in between. Like you see to all their needs, and then you go eat, then you go change, that kind of thing. Which I think
Yeah.
is that's pretty good.
You take care of sweet tits and then you take care of yourself.
Exactly.
So Matthew runs down to the beach where the second shipwreck is happening, where we've got the hussars. I did not remember to
I've heard it called hussars.
hussar. There we go.
But I've also that's one of those ones everybody's gonna know what you mean, and I'm not sure that hussars is even right. Like the winged hussars of like the Hungarians or whatever. That's what I've heard it called. But
yeah.
It's a horse soldier. It's a cavalry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every time I record an episode, I think I have Googled all of the words I need to check the pronunciations of before I start, and every time I'm wrong. So he runs down to the ship and watches sort of the final few men, including this trumpeter who is still playing, as the men are being slowly swept from the ship. There are only a couple of them left. The captain, of course, is like one of the last ones to go. And the trumpeter finally is swept from the ship. But as we've discussed, he's a whacking great man.
Whacking great man.
And apparently a strong swimmer. Because
Okay.
unlike most of the rest of the men, he pops up in the surf and they can see him, and he is trying to swim to shore. And he is caught up in a wave and thrown onto the cliffs. Well, onto a ledge, essentially, a rocky ledge.
Okay.
And because they already have people there ready to do rescue, they've got men sort of on the edge of the cliffs with ropes tied around their waists. They drop a dude down and grab this trumpeter by the legs and manage to pull him up onto the cliff to safety before he's swept back out to sea again. But he's been injured. It says that he was broke like an egg at their very feet. And
Great.
So it's a good image, right?
Yeah. It's like, oh, he's hurt real bad.
And someone rushes him off back to the doctor and into town. Which brings us back to the first shipwreck. So we've all the men on this first/second ship. The cavalry ship is now empty. Most of the men are dead. Like 5 of them have been rescued out of the whole crew. At which point, Daddy Matthew, finally gets to kind of break a word in edgewise and be like, hey, there's another shipwreck happening? Like, hey guys.
Right.
There's this other one too. And they all kind of swarm out back to Dean Point, which is where the first shipwreck was happening. And they find that the Primrose, which was full of Marines, has wrecked. And all of the Marines are washed up on the beach and they are all dead. Every single one of them. Now, the Primrose is a beautifully appointed brand new ship full of brass and weaponry and stuff.
Valuable knickknacks.
And so they all get to work. Now, are you familiar with like how salvage worked in sort of seaside communities? And it happened in the States too, actually. Like I spent a fair amount of time in Hatteras, North Carolina, and like that was very much a thing there too.
I've been to the I forget what it's called, the North Carolina Maritime Museum in Beaufort. You know what I mean? Have you ever been there?
No, but I know the one you're talking about.
So they have a great display about like how you would rescue people, and at stormy at night, and there was some pretty crazy stuff in there that they were using in the 1800s. But there was a lot of that kind of talk, but I don't really know a lot about like the pure salvage side of it.
So the idea for centuries basically was like, if a ship wrecks, in exchange for, more or less, in exchange for saving anyone that you can feasibly, everything in that ship, including the ship itself, is fair game.
Okay.
that belongs to you now
Okay.
as the people who live in the community where the ship happens to have washed ashore.
That seems fair. You know, especially if I'm the sailor and I'm not funding it, that's like, take whatever you want. Thanks for pulling me out of there.
Yeah, very much so. So it's very it's very finders keepers, and what's unique about it is that it persisted, I think, a lot longer than sort of other policies of that kind. Like salvage was widely accepted, if not legal, for quite a long time. And by the point of this story, salvage is sort of understood but not legal. But everyone's going to do it
At the time
anyway.
of this one, kind of like
Yes.
you're not really considered a bandit or a scoundrel, but you're just gonna, we're gonna read our Bible and then we're gonna go pillage this little ship and then go back to reading our Bible. Okay.
Exact, very much so. And part of it is like you get what you can before the protector men show up. Like there are people who are going to come and be like
secure the site kind of a thing.
Yes. And they're not going to like get super mad at you, and they are maybe very bribable. But they are coming, and so you got to hurry quick.
Got to work fast.
Yes.
Okay.
And as a sort of quick historical aside that I think is very interesting, both in Cornwall and I know in Hatteras, and I think this is very common in all communities where shipwrecks were very common and where salvage was a thing, there are always urban legends of wrecking, which is distinct from salvaging. And it's the idea that these communities are causing ships to wreck on purpose in order to salvage them. And that is like almost never ever the case. It's almost always a myth.
Okay.
It's just like basically old-timey true crime conspiracy brain. You know, like, wouldn't it be terrible if these people were making the ships wreck on purpose?
Right. It's titillating gossip, and it's probably something that the millionaire back in London might actually think is real, but it's like, it's a stormy coast, man.
Yes, it's very much like those goddamn rednecks.
Right.
Those goddamn coastal rednecks are wrecking my ships on purpose to take my stuff. And it's like, no, this is just like a notoriously shitty piece of coastline.
Yeah.
And you're mad your stuff is gone.
Right. Yeah. My stock went down by 0.25%. This is an outrage. Those damned rednecks.
Very much so. And so Daddy Matthew is absconding from the scene with the stuff that he has collected from the wreck of the Primrose when he notices that there's a drummer boy, like a probably young teen.
Yeah, they were young as 9 and 10 a lot of the time.
He is washed up on the beach, and Daddy Matthew cannot help but notice that his leg has moved. And he's like, oh, this child is alive. Like, shit. And so he drops, and this is how we can tell that Daddy Matthew is a good man, because he drops everything. He scoops the boy up. He runs him home to his cottage. He gets him safe and warm and dry. And current Matthew notes that, this was very hard on Daddy Matthew, because it meant that by the time he got back to finish salvaging the wreck, the cops were there and he had to bribe them so that he could get away with anything at all.
Yeah. Dang it.
Boo. And so we have 2 shipwrecks and 2 survivors. It's a little unclear and we'll talk about this a little more later. In real life, there were about 5 or 6 survivors from the cavalry ship. And I think that there are supposed to be those as well, but basically we have these 2 survivors that we're primarily preoccupied with, which is the little drummer boy and the whacking great trumpeter.
Whacking great trumpeter. It's just fun to say. He's a whacking great bloke or whatever.
Yeah.
Whacking great man.
And they are both convalescing in this little Cornish community. And the trumpeter has apparently sustained some kind of like a head injury, because he is described thus.
He talked foolish like, and 'twas easy seen he would never be a proper man again. And King George, finding he was fit for nothing, sent him down a trifle of a pension after a while, enough to keep him in board and lodging with a bit of tobacco over.
So
Sounds like a U.S. Sounds like our VA.
I did. That's as the child of a military family for a few generations. It did. I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's about right. It's how they generally operate. Tale as old as time.
But just be thankful that you have enough left for a bit of tobacco
A bit of
over.
tobacco, a luxury. You don't even need that, but yet you're getting it. You lucky you.
So the trumpeter's military career is over. He's not quite right, which is also a narrative that we have never encountered before ever. And the drummer boy, for his part, once he recovers from his near drowning, insists on going around in his full uniform, his full little scarlet uniform. They try to give him civilian clothing, and he swears that he would rather go naked than wear anything less than his full regimentals.
Nice. A king's man.
Very much so. And so Daddy Matthew actually goes and gets a coat off of one of the drowned Marines and cuts it up to make a new uniform for our little drummer boy, who, as he's recovering, starts marching through the town in his little uniform. And I really wish that I could get a better feel for how old this character is supposed to be, because sometimes he reads as straight up 11, and sometimes he reads as a young teen, closer to 14, 15. It's very hard to tell. But he's definitely still got the military bug. Being nearly drowned has done nothing to dampen his enthusiasm.
He's very romantic about it.
Yes, very much so. Which is a thing that's never happened before. Young men do not ever over romanticize military service to their own detriment.
They just right, just always stays the same. Equal amount of romance, no matter what you see, what you get into. For those that don't know, that's very heavy sarcasm.
No.
What do you call it? The All Quiet on the Western Front.
Oh,
That showed that aspect, I would say beautifully, but grimly. It was brilliant in the way it portrayed that, what you just said right there.
beautiful and grim. Yeah, we're gonna have to do that one on the show at some point. I've been putting it off a little bit because it's actually surprisingly hard to find people to come co-host for the really depressing shit.
Right.
Because it's kind of a tough pitch. It's like, hey, do you want to come be funny while I read you the saddest book ever written? And people are like, no, I have a soul.
That it's so depressing, but there's a lot of to that point, and I'm getting us off sidetrack. Arthur Guy Impey, Over the Top. That is it's World War I, but he is an American from Ogden, Utah, that is like, oh, I don't want to miss the war. It's 1914, so I'm going to go over there with the Brits and join the British Army. And then he spends just the next hellacious amount of time. And that is one of the funniest, darkest books you'll ever read in your life. It's a scream. Without ever having experienced trench warfare, because I don't know that there hadn't been many of us that have ever experienced that, is still going to think it's funny because he sets the context for you. He's a brilliant writer.
Oh, that sounds great. I don't know that one.
And so you can get through these depressing things in a soldier's way of laughing at it. And I don't know, the way that he writes as the narrator makes you able to receive and digest the horror without just reveling in it like other books do. You know what I mean? Like wallowing in your own, gore. He allows you to like, I know what you're saying, and yet we're laughing because you're so funny, and you move on to the next subject. It's brilliant.
That's great. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah. Arthur Guy Impey, Over the Top.
Thank you.
And it's in the public domain.
Oh, even better. We'll have to do that one on the show. That sounds a lot more cheerful.
It really, it's funny because it's the same exact subject matter, and yet it's hilarious. However that works.
That's a great way to metabolize horror, it turns out. So our drummer boy, he's taking himself on his little marches. And of course, inevitably, he runs into the trumpeter. Now, these two sort of recovering military lads, what do you think is the first thing that they do when they meet each other?
Well, it would depend on the rank, but I mean, you would greet each other, you would think, oh, hey, you survived. Good to see you. I don't know. I didn't know anybody else. I don't know.
No, the answer is get into a weird pissing contest about which branch of the military is better.
Okay. Okay. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That too. Very plausible.
Because of course that's the first thing they do.
Right.
And the drummer boy, the trumpeter is basically just like, what are you doing here? And the drummer boy says that he wishes he has drumsticks because everyone on his ship went down without even so much as a drum tapped or a musket fired. And that's not like a good Christian burial. And the trumpeter responds with a parcel of Marines.
Okay, so the trumpeter came off the cav ship and the drummer came off the Marine ship.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes... Say no more. Yes, that's exactly what would happen.
Yeah. And the drummer boy says, if I'd a tab of turf handy, I'd bung it at your mouth. You greasy cavalrymen, learn you to speak respectful of your betters. The Marines are the handiest body of men in the service.
This kid's every inch a Marine. I'll give him that.
Yes. Nothing ever changes. And this apparently takes the trumpeter back a little bit because, again,
Right.
He's described as this like giant, and the Marine drummer boy is a literal child, maybe.
Yeah, right.
And so the trumpeter kind of takes a step back and he's like, okay, like, did they die well? Did the men on your ship die well? And the drummer boy says that they died very well, and that at first there was some panic, but when it became clear that all was lost, the major called out to me to beat to quarters. It might have been for a wedding. He sang it out so cheerful. The men fell in as trim and decent as if they were going to church. One of the seamen, seeing as I had to work to keep the drum steady, lashed it tight with a piece of rope, and that saved me afterwards, a drum being as good as a cork. I kept beating away until every man was on deck, and then the major formed them up and told them to die like British soldiers, and the chaplain read a prayer or two, the boys standing like rocks, each man's courage keeping up the others. In 10 minutes, she was gone.
Mm.
And the trumpeter says that was very well done, drummer of the Marines, and asks the boy's name, and he says, I'm John Christian. And then the trumpeter says this.
Mine's William George Tallifer, trumpeter of the 7th Light Dragoons, the Queen's Own. I played God Save the King while our men were drowning. Captain Duncanfield told me to sound a call or two to put 'em in heart, but that matter of God Save the King was a notion of my own. I won't say anything to hurt the feelings of a Marine, even if he's not much over 5 foot tall, but the Queen's Own Hussars is a tearing fine regiment. As between horse and foot, 'tis a question of which gets the chance. All the way from Sayagun to Corunna, 'twas we that took and gave the knocks and drove the French every time. And all the infantry did was sit about in wine shops till we whipped 'em out. And when it came to a stand-up fight at Corunna, 'twas we that had to stay seasick aboard the transports and watch the infantry in the thick o' the caper. Very well they behaved, too. So you played on your drum when the ship was going down. Drummer John Christian. I'll have to get you a new pair of drumsticks for that.
So they've managed to agree that perhaps the Marines and the cavalry are both have their purpose.
So I'm better than you, but we're on the same team and we have different roles. And then you sort of tip your hat. I'll get you some drumsticks because you need them.
Yes, exactly. And of course, what they have in common is that they both did this thing of like they were both playing music while the ship went down in order to uh sort of gird the courage of
Yeah.
the other men.
Yeah.
And after this, they become inseparable. They become like best friends. And they start borrowing Matthew's boat and they like row out to where their respective ships went down and play music together. And which is very cute.
Yeah. That I mean, I've seen that before, where like you kind of deal with trauma by just doing weird things. Like you feel closer to the people you lost by doing stuff like that. I've seen that before.
Yeah. And and it says that they basically they are not seen without each other. They take these long walks, and the trumpeter Talifer is like telling the boy John Christian, like telling him the stories of his career and all of the things that he's been through, and they clearly understand each other. They are locked on like a wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you said is very apt. They share an understanding of an experience that almost no one else can understand, right?
Yep.
Not just having been in the military, but having been shipwrecked, right? Like they both had these like really intense near-death experiences. And it says that they are always talking as if neither could ever have enough. And it's really lovely. They find each other and they have this really special bond. But unfortunately, as we've established, the trumpeter has been retired, shall we say. He's no longer
Medically retired, kind of.
yes, exactly. John Christian is a young, once again healthy, technically still in the military. And it's time for him to go. It's time for him to go back and rejoin the military. And he insists, because the narrator makes a point of noting that King George has probably forgotten all about him. Right? Like he was a child. He doesn't have to go back. No one is looking for him. No one is gonna show up and give him a shit for desertion or something like that. He was a child who survived a shipwreck. They're not fussed.
Right. As far as they know, the manifest of the Primrose are gone.
Right. But the little boy, the lad wants to return. He wants glory, I think, is part of it.
Probably because he was so young, he'd never deployed. He needs to fulfill that calling, I think.
Yes. And what I think is very sweet is that it very specifically says that the trumpeter won't stand in his way. And there's a lot of implication to that phrasing, right? Like he clearly doesn't want him to go. I think he's probably very worried about him going, but he doesn't feel like he has the right to interfere. And so they're going to be separated, and John Christian is going to leave, and the trumpeter, for his part, is going to move into the quarryman's Daddy Matthew's cottage as a full-time lodger. And on the morning of John Christian's departure, they all have breakfast together, Matthew and the trumpeter and the drummer boy. Before they leave, the trumpeter locks his trumpet and John's drum together with the brass padlock. And it says,
"Now Johnny here's going, and he leaves his drum behind him. As for me, I shan't have the heart to put lip to the trumpet any more when Johnny's gone. So we've chosen a word together and locked 'em together upon that. And by your leave, I'll hang 'em here together on the hook over your fireplace. Maybe Johnny'll come back, maybe not. Maybe if he comes, I'll be dead and gone, and he'll take 'em apart and try their music for old sake's sake. But if he never comes, nobody can separate 'em, for nobody beside us knows the word. And if you marry and have sons, you can tell 'em that here are tied together the souls of Johnny Christian, drummer of the Marines, and William George Talifer, once trumpeter of the Queen's Own Hussars. Amen."
that's that. They walk out of the house together, and Johnny and William sort of walk off into the countryside to say goodbye. No one sees what happens. And then the trumpeter comes back by himself. And Daddy Matthew goes out to do his fisherman stuff or whatever. And he comes back, and the trumpeter, William, has like cleaned the cottage spotless and like made food. And it's kind of implied that like this is the beginning of what things are going to be like for him. And I think there's kind of some interesting gender stuff happening here. Because he does it explicitly notes that like he keeps the house spotless and he's making tea. But once Johnny leaves, the trumpeter never mentions him again. They do not say his name. They do not speak of it. But the trumpet and the drum hang over the fireplace. And that's, Johnny's gone, and that's the way things go for quite a while. What do you think so far?
I love this. This is like, some of it hits very close to home, just from my own personal experience. It's beautifully written. I'm loving it.
Are you ready for the end?
Yes, I don't like it.
One of these days, I want to do a supercut of me asking people if they're like ready for the twist or ready for the end, and people just going, "Yeah." Every time I'm like, "Are you ready for me to make you sad?" And they're just like, "Yeah."
Even Stephen King will make you happy at some point, just before, to really crush someone, you must first raise their hopes very high.
Very much so. All right. So it is 1814. So years have passed. And it's about 3 a.m. Daddy Matthew is repairing a spiller. I do not know what that is, and I did not look it up. So let's just pretend he's mending nets or something.
Okay. I'm going to look it up while you're talking.
Sure. And the trumpeter is dozing by the fire when the door opens. And in walks an upright young man in scarlet regimentals. He had grown a brave bit, and his face was the color of wood ash. But it was the drummer, John Christian. And Johnny walks in, and he says, "Trumpeter, trumpeter, are you one with me?" And the trumpeter sits upright and says,
"How should I not be one with you, drummer Johnny, Johnny boy? If you come, I count. If you march, I mark time until the discharge comes."
And Johnny says, "The discharge has come tonight, and the word is Corunna no longer." And he takes down the drum and the trumpet, and he spells out the combination, and he separates them. And he tells the trumpeter that since he left, he's been serving in the 38th Regiment, but he wants to see the Marines again.
Was that his? No, he was in the 7th Light Dragoons. Okay, never mind. I was just wondering if that was the same unit or something.
No, so there's a little bit of an aside. We're given this detail mostly for like fact checking stuff later, but
okay.
he was taken out of the Marines and he was put in like infantry army.
Okay.
But he wants to see the Marines again, and he tells the trumpeter, "You shall call once more for the Queen's Own." And as he turns, Matthew, it says, sees that his scarlet jacket had a round hole by the breastbone, and that the blood was welling there. And so Christian summons them both, and he tells Matthew that they're going to need his boat. And they go out to the coast. Matthew, it says, is sort of following along like he's in a trance. And they row out first to where the cavalry ship sank, and the trumpeter blows reveille. And then they row out to the Manacles where the Primrose sank, and the drummer, it says, the drummer played a tattoo there by the edge of the reef, and the music of it was like a rolling chariot. And he says, "That will do. They will follow." And then they head to shore. And this is where it gets spooky.
Okay.
Once they're back on shore, it says,
The drummer halted and began his tattoo again, looking out towards the darkness over the sea. And while the drum beat, there came up out of the sea and the darkness a troop of many men, horse and foot, and formed up among the graves. And others rose out of the graves and formed up, drowned marines with bleached faces, and pale hussars riding their horses, all lean and shadowy. There was no clatter of hooves or accoutrements, my father said, but a soft sound all the while like the beating of a bird's wing, and a black shadow lay like a pool about the feet of all. When no more came, the drummer stopped playing and said, "Call the roll." Then the trumpeter stepped towards the end man of the rank and called, "Troop Sergeant Major Thomas Irons," and the man answered in a thin voice, "Here." "Troop Sergeant Major Thomas Irons, how is it with you?" "How should it be with me? When I was young, I betrayed a girl, and when I was grown, I betrayed a friend, and for these things I must pay. But I died as a man ought, God save the king."
The trumpeter goes down the line, and we get like 3 or 4 soldiers. One of them says that he was drunk and killed a man in a bar fight, but he died as a man ought, God save the king. And they all kind of they list off their sort of sins, but all of them end with, "But I died as a man ought, God save the king." And then the drummer calls, "It is well. You are content, and we are content to join you. Wait now a little while." And all of the dead men cheer, and they all call, "God save the king," and then they all fade back into the darkness. And the 3 men, the trumpeter, the drummer, and Matthew, poor Matthew, who did not want to get embroiled in any of this. It's very funny to imagine Matthew at this juncture in the story just being like, "What the
Right,
fuck
hair's
is happening?"
sticking straight up on a...
Yeah. And Johnny and William, the drummer and the trumpeter, take the trumpet and the drum, and they change the combination of the lock from Corunna to Bayonne, lock them back together, and put them back on the hook. And then...
After that, he used no more speech, but turned and hung the 2 instruments back on the hook, and then took the trumpeter by the arm, and the pair walked out into the darkness, glancing neither to the right nor left. My father was on the point of following when he heard a sort of sigh behind him, and there, sitting in the elbow chair, was the very trumpeter he had just seen walk out by the door. If my father's heart jumped before, you may believe it jumped quicker now, but after a bit, he went up to the man asleep in the chair and put a hand upon him. It was the trumpeter in flesh and blood that he touched, but though the flesh was warm, the trumpeter was dead.
And that's really the end of the story. There's a little bit of a postscript, but Matthew discovers, of course, that Johnny was killed in Bayonne with the 38th Regiment, and obviously he came back to relieve the trumpeter to discharge him. They've both been discharged together.
Yeah.
Matthew, for his part, being a religious man, as we have been told, confides everything to the parson. And the parson considers it. And this is the very, very end of the story and sort of the parson's takeaway.
"I shouldn't blab this all around the parish if I was you. You don't get no credit for truth-telling, and a miracle's wasted on a set of fools. But if you like, I'll shut down the lock again upon a holy word that no one but me shall know, and neither drummer nor trumpeter, dead or alive, shall frighten the secret out of me." The parson chose the holy word there and then, and shut the lock back upon it, and hung the drum and trumpet back in their place. He is long gone since, taking the word with him. Until the lock is broken by force, nobody will ever separate those 2.
The end.
The end.
What do you think?
That was, that was very lovely. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of in the military type of mind, especially if you join for patriotic reasons, not to pay for college or whatever. But it's like, oh, 9/11 happened, so I'm gonna go fight or whatever. The there's a lot of nobility to it, and it's one of those things like looking in, um, even if like okay, I don't agree with the British colonization of the entire known world. Yet there's some honor on an individual level to sort of a devotion to duty and a devotion to your comrades and doing the right thing, even if doing what's asked of you, even in the face of impossible odds. And those are all, I think, those are admirable. And the fact that that relationship between the two guys, I've seen that. You know what I mean? Like I've felt that myself. Being a straight man, you know what I mean? Like there's there's relationships that you form. Um, in I say this as this is my experience. I'm not speaking for everyone, but I was in a all male unit. This was before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, right? So I'm and even now I know there were gay guys in the unit because now like I've keep up with them on Facebook, and like one of my best buddies is like he and his boyfriend are like we're having beers or whatever, and but I mean that nobody, one, I wouldn't have cared about it, and I wouldn't have told anybody if I did find out. But anyway, here and there, it was just a very masculine kind of environment, and yet you have this real tender love in my case, like a sincere, like I love you like a brother. I would dive in front of a bullet for you, jump on a grenade for you. I love you, man. And then I see that in these two. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think it's beautiful. I love the story.
I I that is why I chose it, because it's so sweet. And I also it's an interesting story, right? Like from a literary analysis perspective, because there are some kind of big unanswered questions at the center of this. And one of them is like, does the story itself think that the loss of these two men to their military service was an avoidable waste? Because they both, John Christian, right, is the sole survivor of this shipwreck. He's like a literal child, or maybe a tween tops, and he survives this horrific thing miraculously and gets a second chance at life and goes right back in and winds up dying as a very young man. And I don't know how much this is the story and how much this is my teasing apart the threads of the story, but like one of the things I couldn't stop thinking about reading this is like, why can men not have this beautiful intimacy without throwing their lives away in these like avoidable situations? Because the other thing, right, is that what brings them together are shipwreck. Like they're not even in battle. These are horrific accidents. And so it's there's layers to this, that I find really interesting. Like why do we have to have the avoidable death and bloodshed, especially in the interest of an utterly disinterested empire? And I also, this is the last thing I'll say before we actually get conversational about it, but like it's also really worth pointing out, right, that this is King George, who was like not great, like he wasn't a very good king.
Well, and at this point, he was stark raving mad. He wasn't even like he literally didn't know those guys existed. He was crazy, just wandering the palace in 1809.
Right. And so like this was written in 1895. This is written from the peak of the Victorian Empire. Yeah. Like that irony is not accidental, I think. So yeah, there's a lot happening in it, and I just don't know.
I can tell you from the point of view of the drummer boy, like he, took the king's shilling and he hasn't done his duty yet. The trumpeter has been in combat and he he showed what he was made of, in Shakespeare and King George or Henry V says, show us here the mettle of your pasture, that you're worth your breeding. He showed that in a cavalry charge on multiple occasions, according to, if he's telling tall tales, I don't know, but according to his narrative to the boy, he's a seasoned combat veteran.
Yes.
So I have seen guys that they've gone on multiple deployments, and when they get hurt, now some of them want to get back in there. Some of them say, you know what, I have paid my dues. I've put in my time. I'm gonna retire medically and just enjoy the rest of my life. So you have that kind, but then you have the kind like the drummer boy who's never deployed to combat. He doesn't know what he's made of by baptism of fire yet. And so
Yeah.
he needs that, I think. I know I was that way. Like if you before I deployed to Iraq, you could not have paid me off for somebody to take my place. Couldn't have done it. And then once I went, I was like, okay, I have sort of done what I joined to do, and that's
Mhm.
I did everything that was asked of me in a foreign country. And again, this is not an endorsement of U.S. foreign policy, but that's just as I see it, or I saw it at the time. And I have no regrets with regard to my own personal viewpoints. But I see where that drummer boy's coming from. He's like, I went through some bad stuff, but it wasn't in the face of the French. Napoleon wasn't back over there, so I got to get over there and see what I'm made of, and he did.
Yeah. It just but it also tore them apart, right? I mean, it's this why does it have to be military before men can have all of this beautiful intimacy? Like why can't we just have the beautiful intimacy outside of the military?
You know, I don't know. My personal point of view, I was, I'm a pretty affectionate guy, and again, a straight guy. So I'm not. This doesn't come from like a gay man's perspective. I'm a straight man. But
Let it be noted that despite being on a queer podcast, Jake is a straight man.
that's right. But I have no problem. Like one of my best friends, I was just in Nashville with him. Like we're best friends. Like he's a writer. He's just a Renaissance man. I love hanging out. We'll hang out for hours in coffee shops, or we'll get a drink and hang out somewhere. And like you can tell the waiters all think that we're a couple, which is but if it doesn't, that's cool, fine. I'm anyway. I don't think it has to be. I don't think you have to have danger involved, basically. Maybe I learned my lesson in the military, but it's like I have some great, masculine relationships, like dear, tender. Like I will hug you, I will cry on your shoulder when we're parting. You know what I mean? Like I don't care about the way it looks. And then yes, I agree with you. I don't think that has to stay inside the military. Now I'll do it, outside for people that have never been in the military. I think people are emotional creatures, and a lot of times and the British are notorious for the stiff upper lip, that kind of thing. Like doesn't matter how you feel, you do your duty. And I'm all about doing your duty, but I don't know why we can't shed a few tears along the way, because it just helps. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think the other reason I sort of chose this story and wanted to have this conversation with you is like, I don't know how sort of terminally online you are. I don't know how familiar you are with like the manosphere and like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson.
Enough to keep my pulse on the situation, you might say.
And like they are obsessed with, shall we call, like military cosplay, right? Like a lot of them have not been in the military,
right?
If not most of them, but they're obsessed with this kind of like image of the warrior and this very like mature, and in all of the dudes that you see on like Reddit and Twitter, the kind of men who are like, I clock the exits for every room I'm in. And you're like, buddy, this is a Wendy's. You're fine. Like, you're safe.
Yes.
It's okay. But that's such a thing right now. That's such a model right now. And that's become a really kind of dominant culture, especially for young men. And what frustrates me about it is it feels like, you know, again, this story is from 1895, but it's part of a very long tradition of sort of stories that are about the kind of beautiful, ineffable bond that forms between military men, which goes all the way up through like Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're in this moment where there's all of these very young men who took the sort of the grimy badass part and left behind all of the tenderness, all of the intimacy, all of the love.
Yeah.
And that's really the important part, right? Like,
Yeah.
what? You picked up the wrong half.
Yes, I well said. I think that's I 100% agree. It's like people that have, and I know Andrew Tate is. I think he's like a kickboxer or was a professional kickboxer. So I mean, he's got some physical prowess to him, I suppose. But there are people that need to remind, and he's one of them. He has to remind you how tough he is about every 30 seconds, in case you forgot. You know what I mean? Which I think if you're really a tough anything, this I think goes for anything. I mean, if you're really good at your job and you know it, and you're good at this thing or whatever, I don't think you have to tell everybody constantly. I think it kind of comes out in its sincerity as you live your life and interact with people and that kind of thing. And that sort of David Goggins style of motivation is about the quickest way to demotivate me. Like, would you stop yelling at me, David? Like, be tender. I need a hug.
Yes.
You know, like,
when was the last time you were tender with your bros, bud?
And I'll give you an example. When I was, my last thing was, it's like it's not manly to show mercy or to show tenderness, which I think is ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's completely. I think the ability to kill someone 1,000 ways makes the tenderness even more special. You know what I mean? It makes the ability to show mercy or to show tenderness or say be emotional in a tender and safe way. I just think that makes it even more special, and without leaning into the violent, parts of it or whatever, the aggressive parts. I was in my last duty station. I was at a basic training in South Carolina, and there was this. It was my time one night to go up with the drill sergeant and sort of wake everybody up. So it was like us officers would rotate. So this was my night. So I went up there, and this drill sergeant came into the guys in the little bay. They're all bunk beds lined up. He's hooting and hollering, and all right, I want everybody up against the wall, and everybody get your rifle. Hey, and there's always a student that's in charge that you're in charge for like 24 hours. How many men you got? How many rifles you got? And the kid couldn't tell him because there was a couple people in the bathroom. There was somebody in the sick bay. So he was fumbling to figure out, okay, how many men are under me in this scenario? How many rifles do we have? And he was, for lack of a better word, scared shitless. He couldn't function properly. And that's the way the military does it. Over in the girls' dorm, the female drill sergeants were doing the same thing. That's how the Army plays. But that's not my style. And so I didn't get in the drill sergeant's way. I let him do his thing, and then he left, slammed the door, and then it was just me and this kid who was my little brother's age at the time. I just saw my little brother there.
Oh.
And he, he hadn't looked at me yet, but then he looked up and saw that I was a captain, which is a higher rank even than the drill sergeant who had just screamed at him. And so in his inexperienced mind, he thought, "Oh, I've effed it up because they brought a captain in, that kind of thing." And the look on his face, he was like, I mean, you could tell his sphincter just snapped shut. And he's he thought I was about to light into him with some screaming and some more of the same. And I just said in a very low, calm voice, "Did you learn anything tonight?" and he went, huh! like what? Like he didn't. And it took a minute to register. And he said, and I could tell he was searching for the word. So I said it for him. "You always make sure you know how many men you got and how many weapons you got." And he was like, "Yes, sir. Yeah, yes, sir. That's what I learned tonight." And I was like, "Hey, you're going to be a good soldier." And I just patted him on the shoulder and turned around and left. And the look on his face, he was glowing when I left with relief and like, yeah, that was the first attaboy he had gotten in 8 weeks probably. And to me, there's no proverb that says the sweetness of the lips increaseth learning. I think you a lot of times are going to teach somebody better when they're not all locked up and their sphincter's not, a little starfish. You know what I mean? It's like you let them relax a little bit, and you take in information better when you're not all uptight. But yeah, I agree with that, like 100%. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because we intuitively understand this so well in so many of our other relationships. Like I have dude friends who are so good to me, right? Like they're like very like emotionally involved, they're very emotionally available, they're very tender. And yet, like when they are going through it, and I'm like, especially if it's something that I don't feel particularly suited to like chat with them about, I'm like, well, what about hitting up, one of your other dude friends and and I've over the years I've had so many guy friends just be like, no, like we don't.
They listen to Andrew Tate. They'd give me bad advice.
Like we don't talk about shit like that. And like it's intuitively, I feel like a lot of straight dudes, they understand that they can't interact with their female friends that way. They understand that they can't interact with their romantic partners that way. They understand that they can't interact with like their parents that way or their colleague. But this weird thing happens where with like other straight men, they short circuit, and it goes back to like either screamy yelly if they're trying to assert authority,
Yeah.
or like, I've never had a complex thought in my life, let's play video games next to each other for 4 hours if they're friends. And it's like like one of the things that really trips me out about this story that I think is fascinating is it to me seems very clearly based on the folktale of the spectral bridegroom. Are you familiar with that?
Not really. I mean, I've heard that term, but no.
So it's and the spectral bridegroom actually gets sort of name dropped in the story, right? When Daddy Matthew is out on the cliffs, he says it's the second coming, the bridegroom has come. The spectral bridegroom is a term for sort of a category of folk tales, and you've probably heard a version of one. And it's the category of folktale where a young man and a young woman are in love, either they're betrothed or they're like newlyweds, and they have to be separated for some reason. The man, sometimes he is shipping off to the military, sometimes he has to go to sea, something has occurred, and they make a pledge, usually either like a magic or religious pledge that they will, be with one another unto and beyond death. And the man goes away, and then something invariably happens, and then he returns, but it winds up being his ghost, right? And usually either the bride also dies, or she dies kind of not too long thereafter, and then they are reunited in death. That is like the folktale framework. And Arthur Quiller-Couch's, as I said, his father and his sister were both folklorists, like Cornish folklorists. So he would have been very familiar with this framework. And the drummer, the story here really is, it's a spectral bridegroom story, right? Like,
Yes, when I heard that, so going back even further than that, and it's probably where the spectral bridegroom even comes from. There's a story from Jewish folklore, and the way they would do it is they would like you would have a marriage, and they wouldn't consummate though. There was just a little ceremony, but then the bride would continue to live in her parents' house, and the groom would go to prepare a place. Like Jesus said, "I go to prepare a place for you." He was hearkening to the Jewish tradition of the groom going to like build a house wherever that was, or build a room on his parents' place, or build his own house. Well, then he would show up one night and take her and whisk her away in the middle of the night. And so there's always in the Jewish mind, and then it's in the Bible. So then a Bible reader, which this guy apparently was in the story. Matthew sounded like a religious Bible reader.
Yeah.
There's a passage in Matthew, the first book of the New Testament, chapter 25, where the bridegroom cometh. So he came in the middle of the night to grab the bride away. And the reason why I say, and like I said, I think that's exactly what you're talking about. This is just from a guy like, if it's a redneck like in the South, the Bible Belt, a lot of times the Bible is the only book in the library in the house.
Right.
So you will know all the Bible stories, and it seeps into your language and all kind of stuff. And so, the prophet Isaiah mentions being thrown like a ball into a large country. And that's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
Like, the bridegroom cometh and will. And so he mentions certainly one biblical reference, and which makes me think that the bridegroom cometh is that like parable from Matthew 25 in the Bible. But then again, like that's directly connected to the spectral bridegroom, because ultimately, if you're whether you're a person of Jewish descent that is Orthodox, or you're a Bible reader, believer, you're kind of waiting on this spectral bridegroom to appear. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's very, thank you for pointing that out, because I am not that well versed in the Bible. Like, so yes, to everything you just said, makes perfect sense. And like, structurally, the story follows that framework. And like, for the first time in my life and on this podcast, I am not saying this to be like, oh, I think these two men are supposed to be in a relationship. I think what it is saying is that these two men have a bond that is equal to a marriage in importance, not that it is romantic love, but that what they have is of the same emotional strength and the same kind of durability. The pledge that they have made is equal to the pledge of a spouse in terms of like importance and intensity.
To that exact point right there, and hearkening back to the Bible, in the Old Testament, 1 Samuel, you had the King Saul had a son named Jonathan, who is an absolute badass. It like describes him attacking this position, which is very Point de Hawk sounding from the Normandy, where he literally climbed up a steep rock face to attack him. So I mean, he's a combat vet. And then David, King David of David and Goliath fame, that kind of thing. He had it mentions his exploits, and he was a combat vet. But when they got together, and again, there's some people who are like, oh, they're definitely gay, and maybe they were, but the Bible doesn't specifically say that. What it does specifically say is they're both combat vets. And then David says, and I think it's when Jonathan dies, but it mentions they loved each other. They were like brothers. And when they were being parted, like, I didn't know if they'd ever see each other again. It said that Jonathan fell on his neck and wept. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was a lot of emotion there. And then at sort of the eulogy after Jonathan was killed in battle, David says his love surpassed the love of women, just like what you just said. And again, whatever is not mentioned, who knows? But what was, according to what was mentioned, it was whatever it was. It was different. It was a special, almost a marriage type of relationship. You
It was
know,
powerful.
it was very
Yeah.
powerful. Whatever it was.
Well, and it's there. There are like studies and things that kind of suggest that the male loneliness epidemic came about in part because of homophobia, right? That like queerness became more visible and men reacted by being like, oh, ew, gross. Guess I can't have intimacy with the bros anymore. Which is sad because they're hurting only themselves.
Right.
Like,
For sure.
and it's, I don't know, it's so interesting to see like a little time capsule story like this that's like, oh yeah, look at all the things that you have lost. Like, look at what you're giving up by being fucking weird for no reason.
Right. Being a freaking hermit.
And yeah, and I, so the only other thing I wanted to make sure I kind of mentioned is that the Primrose and the Dispatch were real ships that did really wreck on the same night on the Cornish coast.
Wow.
The sole survivor of the Primrose really was a drummer boy, and the Dispatch, I think there were 7 men saved from the Dispatch, and the Arthur Quiller-Couch was Cornish and was clearly inspired by that. I think probably by the memory of that. No, he wouldn't have been. Yeah, no, he was alive. But he would have been very young. No, he wouldn't have been alive yet. Might have been a story he heard from like his.
That would have been local folklore news for sure.
Yes. I had to do some very quick math and I was like, wait, 1809 to 1895 is too many decades.
But yeah, I think we all have places where it's like, oh, right down there in the river, that's where a guy jumped in and saved a little kid when he was drowning back in the 40s.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's a special spot in the river.
I live in Richmond and there are all kinds of different little urban legends about various landmarks and
right.
And the river especially. So yeah, I mean that's the roll call of the Reef.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'd never heard of it. That I love it. That's wonderful.
We love a good B-side of classic literature in this podcast. I'm always finding the weirdest possible. The only bummer is, and I'm saying this to slightly call you out, dear listeners, we always have fewer downloads when I'm doing something really obscure. Like people want to see a name they recognize. Like I do Roald Dahl and people are like, I know who he is.
Yeah. Well, tune it in. Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you have to, everyone needs to click on the really obscure ones because those are the really weird ones that you never expect.
That's right.
So I need everyone to validate my research by clicking on the stuff they don't recognize.
Well, I am enriched by this podcast. You know what I mean? Like that was wonderful. Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you. This was a lovely conversation. And do you have any final thoughts before we close things up for the day?
Not really. I mean, that was great. It was a great story, great conversation. We worked through, solved all the world's problems. It was great.
Perfect. And if people cannot get enough of you, where would you like them to find you?
Well, the Cultured Bumpkin on YouTube is where I have a lot of full-length classics, which they would recognize. Also, a lot of short stories and poems, and a lot of them I do in Southern, which is fun for me. And then also on Instagram or TikTok is the Cultured Bumpkin. So those are the 3 places someone could find me. And I'm good about returning messages and stuff. I try to be. So if you ever reach out, I'll try to answer back, kind of a thing.
Beautiful. Well, I very much enjoy both your full length readings and your little Instagram posts. I'm not on TikTok. I can't make myself do it. But I do really like your Instagram posts. They get sent to me not infrequently, which is very charming. Like people see your Instagram posts and they go, "You know who would love this?" My friend
Well,
Grace.
that's wonderful. Like I'm glad because especially, now that we know each other, it's like, no, that's the kind of people that I want in my algorithm. Because TikTok, you got to train your algorithm.
Yeah.
When you get on there, they're going to show you the most mindless nonsense. Whereas once you like train it like a little dragon or whatever, it'll
I was going to say that's going to
it
be the next children's movie franchise, How to Train Your Algorithm. Oh no.
then it gets a lot better. So now when I'm scrolling, it's like literature type of stuff, but it takes a little bit of getting there.
Yeah, you gotta poke and prod it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with me this week.
Thank you for having me. I had a wonderful time.
And thank all of you for being here with us this week. We very much appreciate it. Just a reminder, because Maddie will have my head if I don't say it. We do still have a merch store on our website. You can get hats, you can get t-shirts, you can get my favorite, which is a shirt that says "Failing to maximize my potential." It has a skeleton on it. Because we are all failing to maximize our potential every day. And that's a good thing, I think, actually. Other than that, we'll be back next week with more literary nonsense. And as always, if you can, this week, this month, this pay period, consider supporting a living author or voice actor, because they could really, really use the love. Bye.
Come, all you warlike seamen that to the seas belong. I'll tell you
Didn't
all
Read
the
It
fight
was
me
created,
boys
written,
aboard
researched,
the
and recorded by me, Grace Todd.
was up an Irish
Maddie Wood is our co-producer and social media maven. Editing by Tally, a true podcasting professional, and Grace Todd. Our theme song is Books 2.0, written, performed, and recorded by William Albritton. Our logo was designed and illustrated by the incredibly talented Jess Versus. Special thanks to Black Iris Social Club in Richmond, Virginia. Reach out to us with questions, concerns, or academic scrutiny at didntreaditpod@gmail.com.
against our daring foe. We'd not sail many lengths to sea before a ship we spied. She being some lofty Frenchman, come bearing down so wide. She hailed us in French, me boys, and asked us from where we came. Our answer was from Liverpool, and London is our name. Oh, pray, are you some man of war? Pray, what may you breed? Oh, then replied our captain, oh, then you soon shall see. Come strike your English colours, or else you shall bring to. Since you're so stout, you shall give out, or else we will sink you. The first broadside we gave to them, it made them fall to wonder. Then rigging and the mainmast came rattling down like thunder. We drove them to their quarter, they could no longer stay. Our guns did roar, we made so sure, we showed them British play. So now we've took that ship, me boys, Godspeed us fair wind, that we might sail to Plymouth town, if the heavens prove so kind. We'll drink a health unto our captain, and all such warlike souls. To him we'll drink and never flinch out of